Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Girls in STEAM Secret Identity event. I would like to begin by gratefully acknowledging that Science World is located in the traditional, unceded Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh village of Chinook. My name is Jenny McQueen, and I'm a program manager here at Science World for a teen enrichment program called Future Science Leaders, and I will be your host today. We will start today with a quick introduction from our amazing group of mentors. You will then have a chance to meet them in smaller groups and breakout rooms to learn more about their careers. We will have 3 breakout rooms with 3 mentors in each room, as you can see on the slide. Each breakout room session will last for about 15 minutes. Then we will give you a chance to rotate to a different room to meet more mentors. There will be 3 rotations so that everyone will have an opportunity to meet all the amazing mentors by the end of the event. We would like to thank SAP for their generous support of these events. All right, here we go. So this is introducing the mentors in room 1. Room 1, my secret identity is running ultra marathons. So that's over 200 miles. So on your phone, you can select the triangle, the circle, the diamond, or the square as to who you think it might be. And the answer is Nicola. So at this point, Nicola has a chance to introduce herself, tell us a little bit more about what she does and her secret identity.
Hi guys, my name's Nicola. I have a PhD in medicinal chemistry. I'm actually now a registered massage therapist. And a week ago, just under a week ago, I completed a 209.2 mile foot race down in Washington. So I'm very, very sore right now and in much need of a massage.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nicola. So we've got, the other mentors coming in. So Claire, if you could introduce yourself as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Claire Philippou. I have a Bachelor of Science in Fiber Chemistry. I studied at the University of Alberta, focusing on high performance textiles and fibers. And my secret identity is that I'm a film and television actress.
Fantastic. Thank you, Claire. And we've got one more introduction for room 1.
I believe that's me. Hi, everybody. My name is Emma. I also have a PhD in chemistry, so it's great to be in a room full of chemists. I have spent the last 6 years as a chemical educator in various universities, and I'm currently up at Quest University in Squamish, British Columbia. And my secret identity is that of somebody who lives an entire life with yarn. I'm a knitter and a crafter, and I have lots to show you in our room.
Fantastic. Thank you, Emma. So we'll move on to our second question. So this is room number 2. And the question is, my secret identity is a contortionist. So we have Shazzy, Vienna, or Johanna. Or that's a tough one. You can choose one of those 4 answers. And the answer is Vienna. A lot of people taking guesses. That's awesome. So we'll start with an introduction to Vienna.
Hey everyone, I'm not in an outfit to show you some moves right now, but that is my secret identity. I also really love aerial arts, so I really like doing, silk yoga and things like that. But more about my professional life, I'm the lab manager for the Forensic Entomology Lab at the Center for Forensic Research. A lot of big words just to say that I help police and other agencies, wrongful conviction folks, by raising the insects that we use for research. My own research, though, is more in forensic anthropology, so I study bones. And I look forward to meeting you all.
Thank you so much, Vienna. And we will turn to Shazzy, if you could introduce yourself as well and share your secret identity.
Sure. Hi, I'm Shazzy. and I'm the Unreal Engine supervisor at Wild Brain Animation. So I make cartoons all day and develop different pipelines. I have a background in computer science, and I specialize in video game development. And my secret identity is I am also a crafter. I'm notorious for making like different little headbands that I wear in all my Zoom meetings. So I'm very excited that Halloween is coming up. I have a whole collection of little tiny hats that I make.
That is fantastic. And we will turn to Jet. If you could also introduce yourself and share your secret identity, that would be awesome.
Yes, hi. My name is Jet. My secret identity, actually, I have a coffee shop back home. I do baking a lot. And then my real job, my real profession, I'm a dentist with a PhD in oral pathology and molecular biology. I did cancer research, and I do a lot of, I see a lot of patients when I really have to go to my real identity.
Fantastic. So many skills. Everybody has so many skills. That's great. And that is room number 2. So we will move to our question for room number 3. And the question is, my secret identity is making stained glass art. Who might it be? Tamiza, Ingrid, or Vera? Interesting. And we will introduce room 3. Ingrid, if you want to start with sharing, your title and your secret identity.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ingrid. I am the professional practice leader for respiratory therapy at Richmond Hospital. I've been a respiratory therapist for 14 years, working in critical care until recently at VGH. And I'm currently getting my master's in health leadership at Royal Roads University. And my secret identity is that I am an electronic music DJ and vocalist and songwriter. I have traveled and toured through Europe and the US and play at big festivals here in British Columbia and clubs and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ingrid. And we'll be introducing Tamiza.
Yes, hello, my name is Tamiza Jivraj. I'm a senior engineer with Metro Vancouver. Metro Vancouver treats our drinking water and treats our wastewater as well, and that's the area that I specialize in. My secret identity, I volunteer for many causes. I do lots of volunteer work for social services, poverty alleviation, and the one that I'm most proud about is the Right to Conquer Cancer, where I cycled for 200 kilometers from Vancouver to Hope. So yeah, that's me.
That is fantastic. So Vera has not been able to join us as of yet, and she may join us in a bit, and you might get to meet her in the breakout room. Thank you, everyone. So it is now time to move into breakout rooms. So the slide you will see shortly lays out which mentors are in which rooms.
Brian, I'll be your host in this room. I have a couple of starter questions here just for everybody. Some of them will get all of you to answer. Some of them we may just hop around to particular people there. But I guess what's a misconception people might have about your field? When people think chemistry, what's something that they think is going to be true that maybe isn't so much true? I'll start with Emma on that one.
I have strong feelings about this because I'm a teacher, because I'm an educator. I feel like everybody shows up expecting it to be impossible and that there's going to be a lot of memorization. And part of what I always loved about chemistry is it's the opposite of both of those things. It uses every part of your brain. It's a lot of problem solving and So I think people show up expecting it to be really tough, and it is definitely hard, but the reason why I always liked it the most out of all the scientific genres I took early is because it doesn't like has some memorization, but also has conceptual stuff. And so I would say that's probably the number one misconception I get from students, at least.
I found one of the misconceptions is I always assumed that chemistry was just lab-based and test tubes. But it's way more applicable than that. All of the work I ended up doing with fiber testing, you're literally taking a slice of a mattress and lighting it on fire and seeing how long it takes for it to catch fire. Or, you're taking a synthetic fabric swatch and you're ripping it apart with a machine and seeing how long and how fast it breaks. So there's way more application with chemistry than I thought there would be. Going through high school, I thought it was all just formulas and test tubes and figuring out bases and stuff, but I was shocked by how broad it truly is.
Nice. Nick, anything from these answers you've heard that resonate for you? Anything that kind of your journey into chemistry? What were some of the things you remember?
I would say I totally agree with Emma. I was smiling when she was giving her answer that, especially when I was TAing up at UBC and back in the UK whilst I was doing my PhD, a lot of the undergrad students would be so scared, especially of organic chemistry, which is what I specialized in, because they felt they had to memorize everything. And it's not that case at all. You basically learn a bunch of basics and then you build on that. And if you're analytical and methodical and love puzzle solving and putting answers together, then there's no reason why you can't thrive at chemistry. And to be honest with you, now that I'm considerably older than I was back then, you also realize that it's okay not to have the answer to everything. That's what science is about. It doesn't matter if it's chemistry, physics, biology. You've got a passion for trying to understand things and get answers to things. And sometimes you just won't necessarily get to that one answer, and things change all the time too. So I think that is probably one of the reasons why I went as far as I did with my chemistry career. And even though I don't necessarily do a lot with my chemistry anymore, except when I'm working at Science World, I still use a lot of what I learned in everyday life, and especially in my job as an RMT. I'm an analytical and methodical practitioner. So yeah, I think you don't just have to pick a science and think that needs to mean a job for life. It's basically stepping stones into anything you want it to be. So yeah, what Emma said really resonated well with me. And as for Claire, who doesn't like blowing things up and setting fire to things, right?
It's a good job for anyone.
Yeah.
I'm curious, is there an area of life where chemistry is involved that people might be surprised? Like what's an industry where, yeah, actually there is a lot of chemistry coming in here that maybe people weren't as aware of? Feel free to pop in if anyone's got an answer there.
I would think food chemistry. Not that I studied food chemistry, but cooking. There's so much chemistry involved in that. And then obviously right now with COVID, medicinal chemistry, biochemistry. Yeah. So, I mean, part of my PhD was looking at mRNA vaccines 20 years ago, before many of these fine folks were born. And so the technology's actually been around since the 1980s. And to see it come through to fruition in terms of a bunch of vaccines is, as I'm sure the rest of my colleagues here can attest to, it's incredibly wonderful to think that, wow, this is what science can do. So yeah, there's lots of areas. It doesn't just mean that you're in a laboratory throwing things into a test tube at all.
Thanks, Nick. Emma.
Yeah, I mean, our standard first year textbook is called Chemistry, the Central Science. And that's what I always say when I'm talking to all of my colleagues. It's like a running joke that they call me the central scientist, because I can truly talk to anybody, whether or not they're earth scientists or biochemists or whatever. And so, and I get sent pictures of like labels all the time of like personal care products and foods, because people want me to read them, because it's this weird party trick I have. So I think you'd be surprised how much chemistry is truly involved in anything. Like my girlfriend and I, we are currently dyeing yarn to knit with, and we're using my knowledge of chemistry to dye yarn using like avocado peels and stuff like that. So pretty much everything. Yeah.
Very cool. Thanks, Emma. Claire.
One crossover that I've realized, especially in my time as being an actor now, is talking to makeup artists and the amount of chemistry in makeup. And they're always looking for allergies and this chemical. And if we put this sort of a foundation on, then we have to do a different kind of blush. And I'm no makeup expert at all, but I found it really interesting to be like, well, of course, that's also chemistry, the way those things mix and the way they interact with your skin. I mean, if you think about it, literally everything in the world is made up of chemicals. So you could really kind of connect chemistry back to everything. And to be clear, I hated chemistry. When I was in high school, I did it reluctantly. I did it so that I could do all three sciences. I thought I would go into biology. My dad's a physicist, and chemistry was the worst one. And then I did my first year, and I took an organic chemistry class, which I'd always heard would be awful. And I loved it. And then I found out there was different ways you could apply chemistry, and I applied it to fabrics. And I was like, great, I'm in like nerd fashion. So it was just kind of realizing that I was good at dealing with chemistry and the puzzles of it, but you can really apply it to anything.
Emma, I'm curious, as an educator, are there any interesting fields that some of your students have moved into from their knowledge of chemistry?
Yeah, I
we got
actually
2 minutes left. Oh.
I'll keep it fast. My students, like, I have some who've gone to medical school, but I have a lot of students currently engaged in like environmental science, where they're taking their chemistry and they're moving into areas where they're studying atmosphere, where they're working in geochemistry, where they're working with earth materials. And so a lot of students take their chemistry, and yeah, I've seen a lot of them moving into climate and earth science, which feels especially important right now. And so yes, yeah.
Very relevant there. Oh, I see we're. Apologies for joining you a little bit later here. I'm Brian. Science Room. Yeah, happy to be hosting the room there with our wonderful chemistry panel. Did I walk in? We were talking a little bit about some of your secret identities. Claire, I'm curious, what's the weirdest audition you've ever had to go to? The strangest role that they had you up for, weirdest thing you had to do?
I feel like I almost shouldn't say it if there's children in the group.
Perhaps the second weirdest thing.
The second weirdest, I don't know. I feel like they're all pretty weird. Commercial auditions are the weirdest because you have to pretend you're being like eaten by lava or something like that. But I just played the role of an airplane mechanic for a Christmas film. So I feel like that was also a weird audition because I don't know anything about airplanes, but I used my background in science to just know how to say all the big words.
Excellent. Another skill that science will give you. I know some of you, like Nick and Claire, you've moved on from strict chemistry careers, but I'm curious, working as a chemist in any form, what did a typical day look like? What kind of things do you get to do? So Claire, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, when I was working most was with a sports equipment production company. So I was part of the quality assurance team. And what would happen is we were always you would show up in the morning, have your coffee, open your emails, and everyone's working on different time zones, the different labs and the different production companies all over the world. So you sort of catch up on that. And then you receive the samples, and then depending on what the day necessarily needed, we might get right into testing it. That would be going into the lab space they had, and everything from hitting stuff with hammers to lighting it on fire to trying to rip it apart, to trying to see if it's see-through, doing color transfer tests, that sort of thing. And we would create notes, and then we would also be in close contact with the design team. So the people who were actually making the patterns and doing the production, and they'd say, well, if you need this to stop an impact, because it's going to be for hockey, it fails these tests or it succeeds in these tests. And that's sort of what we did. So it was, we were always in contact with all the different departments as well, which I kind of liked. It was very central.
Nice. Nick, the kind of chemistry work you were doing, what would a typical day look like?
It would be mostly lab time. So because some of our reactions could be cooking for, anywhere from 15 to 19 hours, and you'd have to set up equipment that would add a drop every 10 seconds or so. You'd often go home for a couple of hours and then come back. You might have to come back on a weekend. Basically, you treated it like it was your little baby. You looked after your reactions and experiments, especially something that might take a couple of days to cook, for lack of a better phrase. I found for me that being in a lab could be quite lonely, even though you might be in a laboratory with, up to 10, 15, 20 other people, because you were so focused on your line of work. So I think it was really, really important to make sure that you had stuff to do outside of your lab life as well, just so that you didn't start talking to test tubes. But yeah, I think if you're very driven and very thought oriented, I think being in a lab, like I say, you wouldn't necessarily realize that 10 hours have gone by. You'd think, oh, I thought it was only 15 minutes.
Right, just focused on the reaction.
But not all chemistry is lab-based. So anybody that's considering a career in it, I would encourage them to figure out what that career entails. It's not all being stuck in a lab wearing a white coat, although I kind of like that.
Well, Emma, I think you're a great example. It's not all in a lab. You work as an educator or a chemist. What's a day for you look like?
Part of why I like being an educator is it's like there's no typical day. Like when I'm teaching, that's my primary. I teach classes. I teach at a unique university where students take one class at a time every day for 3.5 weeks, for 3 hours a day at minimum. And so when I'm teaching, my days are quite intense with teaching in office hours, and then planning for the next day or getting my lab set up. When I'm not teaching, I'm doing all sorts of stuff like going to conferences, doing research in chemical education or in my field of interest. I get to travel quite a lot when we're permitted to travel. I get to do volunteer stuff like this. And so I have this really diverse life, which I love, that like some weeks I am at my desk 15 hours a day. And then the next week I could be on a plane to go somewhere else to go talk about my research. And so that's part of what I always loved about being an educator is you get to do so many different things and you have new students once a month. And so you have this whole new cohort to get to know and teach. And so, yeah, it's a joy.
Is there something from one of your students that sort of surprised you or made you look at your work in a different way?
Yeah, because I work at a small university, I'm actually the only chemist. And so I went sort of from a culture being surrounded by chemists to being surrounded by just other physical scientists. And so I spend now a lot of time with like earth scientists, and I live in Squamish, which is north of Vancouver, that I'm sure a lot of you have been to, which it's the outdoor recreation capital of Canada. And so my students have introduced me and my colleagues have introduced me to like some of the incredible hiking trails out here, all sorts of activities. I started ski touring with students. I started stand-up paddleboarding with students. And on Tuesday of this week, I did a 35-kilometer hike through Garibaldi Park with my colleague who's an earth scientist. And so getting to appreciate chemistry, because that's what mountains are, but big chemistry, hiking up big chemistry.
Fun. Nicola, I see you smiling and nodding about 35 kilometers after just running 200 miles. Claire, we've got a very poetic and interesting question in the chat there. So how does the chemistry of molecules translate into the chemistry of acting?
I would say they always say acting is all about reacting. And the thing with chemistry is we're always making different molecules react with each other. It's going to be big and bad, or it's going to be harmonious and wonderful. So I like to think of myself as carbon, and then everyone else can revolve around me.
Very organic.
Just react off based in that. I would just say, honestly, everything, the coolest part about doing science is meeting the most wide range of people, and it gives you such a wide life experience that I have so many different characteristics I can draw from, like Nicola was saying, the people that are very focused and singular in labs, to the chemists who are doing experiments in the back hallways, even though they're not supposed to. There's a lot of different kinds of personalities. So I find it's easy to draw on different characteristics. But yeah, I would say, I guess my advice would just be, as long as if you're carbon, then you get to control everything else in your life. So there you go.
Awesome.
Plus, carbon can exist as diamond.
Oh,
Right? There you go.
I'm curious, so many of you have moved from one field to another, and I think there's a lot of pressure we put on ourselves that you have to study this and that will move you forward into this career path. Do you want to talk a little bit about what was that transition moments like for you when you decided, you know what, maybe this is not so much what I want to be doing, but this is the new thing that is drawing my interest? Nick, Claire, any thoughts
Oh,
there?
I'm happy. Yeah. I think for me, mine's a little bit of a varied story with some highs and some lows. I originally wanted to go into medicine, but you can probably tell from my accent, I am not Canadian. And back in the UK, back in those days, it was still very much a class system, unfortunately. And so applying to medical school, coming from the background that I came from, was a little unusual. And I was unsuccessful at getting into medical school, but I was really good at chemistry and I enjoyed it. So I decided I would take that route with the belief that I would re-entertain medicine later on. Well, I ended up enjoying chemistry so much that I took it all the way through to PhD. And then I thought I might want to go into forensics. So I became a police dispatcher for 5.5 years. And then I realized I definitely didn't want to do that. And then I started looking back at health sciences and ways that I could get into medical related fields without necessarily needing to give up another 15 years of my life at school.
So almost full circle there. That's really
Full
cool.
circle. Yeah.
Claire, I'm aware we're in our last 2 minutes here, but any
I would say, because I started my first year in neurosciences before I switched to fiber chemistry, and I would just say you don't know what's possible. So just keep moving forward, and different doors open and different opportunities are opened. And the more education you have behind you, the easier it is and the less scary it is to walk through all those different doors.
Nice.
Yeah.
Emma, I'm sure you've seen a lot of students face the same kind of challenges there. Any words of wisdom?
Yeah, I think this is the new reality of the workforce, is we all just are going to have really strange and weird careers because jobs are being created that we don't even know about. And so just never turn down an opportunity. That's what I've done, and that's what my students do, and it's good.
I think one thing I've realized as well, being somebody that moved to Canada, is that times have changed, where it's almost embraced now that maybe after a couple of years you go off and explore something else. And it's not because you've given up on what you were previously doing. It's just that you've come to the end of that chapter and it's opened up a new.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Brian. I'm from Science World, and I'll be the host on this breakout room. While we're waiting for a few more people to join us, I wanted to touch base on secret identities a little bit more. Emma, tell me a little bit more about your secret identities. What kind of things you like to get to outside of your STEM and STEAM work?
So I started knitting about 3 years ago because one of my best friends at work is an avid knitter and she wanted somebody to knit with her. So she taught me how to knit, and it has been such a joy for the last 3 years, where the last couple have been especially stressful while we're all at home, missing connections to people. So now I get on Zoom with my friends all over the world and we knit together. And so it's been really nice to take this like I think chemistry requires a lot of creativity and problem solving, and math, and that's knitting, is like math and problem solving and learning new skills and building dexterity. And so I feel like I picked it up pretty fast and have just turned on to a full craft person. I have like 3 bins underneath my bed filled with projects and yarn, and I'm hand dyeing yarn, and it's just it's been awesome.
Nice.
Yeah.
So the different knitting stitches kind of analogous to different molecular bonds or things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually did a project in one of my classes where students were supposed to represent organic chemistry as art, however they wanted to, with like paintings or mobiles or movies. And I participated, and I actually knit molecules and like pieced them together. And it was really fun and super cool. And so yeah, just getting to see the marriage of like art and science is something I totally missed out on as a student, and have totally engaged in now as an adult and wanting to bring it to my own students.
Very cool. For those joining us, this is a very chemistry heavy room. We've got a lot of different backgrounds in chemistry. I've got on our standard list of questions here, we've got a lot of younger people who are looking to get into STEM and STEAM fields. If you could meet the 12-year-old you and give some advice, what's the thing you wish you had known going into some of these fields? Nick?
I think kind of similar to what I said in the last breakout. I would tell my 12-year-old self that it's okay if I change my mind and decide to go and study something different. I had a hard time in my 20s. Actually, I didn't walk away from my chemistry, but actually taking my chemistry in a different avenue, because I think I'm from the generation where it's expected that you pick a career and you do it until the day you retire. So I'm glad that attitudes have changed, but I would tell my 12-year-old self that.
Claire?
I would say almost similar to Nicola's. Everyone told me that anything I picked, I didn't have to stick with till the end of time. But for some reason in my head, I thought, if I go to school and become this, I'm locked in forever. And when you're like, I went to university when I was 17, that's not a lot of life done, and there's a lot left. So it seemed so overwhelming. But I would just say that the more open and the more curious you stay, the more opportunities are going to present themselves, and the more things are going to open up that you didn't even exist, or you didn't think existed, or wasn't even a possibility. And I've mentioned it before, like the degree I ended up finishing, I didn't even know it existed until I did my first year at the U of A. And then I slowly was curious about what was going on, just kind of discovering stuff that way, but being open and being okay with the thought of change and staying malleable.
Nice. Emma?
I agree with both strongly. One thing I would maybe recommend to myself is enjoy being a student a little bit more. I felt like I was like putting so much pressure on myself all the time. And now that I like am finished graduate school, I look back on it with such affection, with like how much I was learning and the mentorship I was receiving and the friendships that I had made. And then everybody moves because we all go and do other things. And so I would just say, I would recommend to myself and to everybody to sort of pause and smell the roses a little bit and enjoy it, because it's honestly the greatest. But you don't realize that when you're in it, because you're like, gosh, I'm tired and learning, and it's a whole thing. So yeah.
Just to interject, I also wondered if maybe listening to the three of us, and I appreciate that we're slightly different age groups, I also wonder if maybe some of the stress we put on ourselves is because we were women in what was a very, very, certainly for me, it was a very male-dominated profession back when I was undergrad and PhD. It's obviously gotten better and attitudes have changed, but I still think that if I'd have been a male, that it might have been a little bit easier. I mean, I don't know, but that's just the impression I get drawing from my experiences.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I worked with another woman in a lab for the first time as a postdoc. So I did my entire undergrad, my entire PhD without ever working with another woman. And so I definitely felt a lot of stress and pressure, because I felt that it was not just my degree, but it was like a representation of the fact that like I was my PhD supervisor's first female graduate student in 20 years. And I was like, okay, don't mess up. And so I think maybe that's part of it. That's a really good point.
If you didn't have the job you currently have, so we talked a little bit about careers changing, do you think your next career is going to be driven more by your STEAM fields or by your secret identities? Claire, yours is a bit of an easier one there because I guess in a certain
I
sense
don't
it
know.
has.
I have so I've sort of let my secret identity of being an actor take over STEAM. So I've left that behind for the time being. But science knowledge is something you can always come back to. And ever since COVID hit, I have my secret dream is to work in a surgery. So either being an OR nurse or I could start now and go to med school and become a surgeon, but I like the idea that I have no idea what I'm going to do next year. I might keep acting, or I might try to, help out in some surgeries in an OR room. I love that kind of stuff. So who knows? I'm just trying to be open to whatever I feel like learning next.
Fun. I'm a piano teacher. That's cool too.
Yeah, I played the piano all growing up. And so sometimes I think about maybe that's what I'd want to do, is just teach piano and find joy in music and help other people find joy in music. So I think if I wasn't in chemistry, that might be what I'm doing.
Nice. Alexandra's got a great couple of questions here. What made you get into chemistry or made you like science from the beginning? Can you remember that moment? Nick? Or sorry, Claire, you go.
Yeah, my dad is a nuclear medical physicist. So we were always surrounded by science and we would always play science games. And I've said this before, I hated chemistry when I was in high school. And then when I got to university, I had to take it as one of my science credentials when I was doing biology. And then I realized actually just how applicable chemistry was to a variety of different stuff, including fibers and fabric. And I was really into all that kind of stuff. So there was a switch for me when I was already in university, just on how interesting and how usable chemistry was.
I'm sorry, I have to ask, what is a science game? What do they look like?
Oh, we'd be driving like it was kids, and my dad's like, okay, if a car is driving 40 kilometers an hour south and another one is driving 90 kilometers north, and they hit each other, what is the force of impact and that kind of stuff. Like, I know.
And a little terrifying while you're in a car at the same time.
Oh yeah.
Nick?
For me, I went to a science fair with my, I guess, what you'd call elementary school, middle school. And it was at the University of Liverpool. And they were doing a whole bunch of stuff with liquid nitrogen, liquid oxygen, and all that other stuff, and blowing things up. And I just remember thinking, wow, this stuff is amazing. And I was also very fortunate to have a grandparent, actually two grandparents, who were always encouraging us to keep learning and to be inquisitive and ask questions. So I was a self-confessed nerd. So I loved this stuff. It really resonated with me. So it was just a natural progression. Prior to that, I wanted to be a nun. So needless to say, I didn't follow through with that one.
Emma, I see you've got some knitting going on at the same time. That's exciting.
Yeah, always have yarn in my hands. I got into science because of my dad, who was a farmer, but we would hike with this like plants and trees of British Columbia book, and he'd like teach me all this sort of stuff. And I just like grew up like loving science and the natural world. And then he got me a chemistry set when I was 10. And then my high school chemistry teacher was so meaningful to me. And that was just sort of how things worked. Also, my mom was an English teacher, and I wanted to get as far away from that as possible. And so I fell in love with science very early and just sort of never looked back. And then chemistry was so shaped by good teachers. Good teachers are everything. I feel like that's sort of how people end up doing what they do.
Awesome. We've got about 45 seconds left here. Things that you're optimistic about in science or careers in science moving forward. Any final words of wisdom for anyone?
I think more women and girls are going to enter into science because they no longer feel that it's just a male-dominated profession. And I think certainly within medicinal chemistry and medicinal sciences, it's an exciting time right now. It's a silver lining of COVID. I think we could end up with successful drugs for other diseases like HIV and Ebola, dengue fever, all those things that we've kind of just kept a little bit of a handle on, but never actually truly resolved. And this could be huge.
I would love to hear from all three of you how you got started in your scientific fields.
Anyone want to start first? If not, I can jump in. So I actually did another degree before I went and pursued archaeology. But when I did archaeology, the main reason was because I couldn't imagine myself doing, more years in a graduate program in something that, my heart wasn't set in. And I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad I took that time to kind of explore and figure out what made me happiest. And for me, it's doing field work. I love being outdoors. I love being active. And when I found out that you can have a career in the outdoors and get paid to go camping and diving and all those things, I was absolutely sold. So so I did that, and I spent 5 years doing archaeology before I went back to school to get my master's and now my PhD. My PhD is in criminology with a specific focus on forensic anthropology. So anybody else wants to jump in?
Thanks.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I work in animation, more on the computer science side of stuff. And ever since I was little, I loved to draw and doodle. And I always said I wanted to make cartoons. I didn't know how. Even through high school, I never did any computer science. I was not a techie person. I didn't play video games, like none of that. So after high school, I was good at math, and I figured like Disney, Pixar, they use computers to make animation. That means they need engineers. So like, that's all I had to go off of. So that's how I got into computer science. And then I got exposed to graphics and animation and all that, and just kind of kept chugging along that path. So it ended up working out. So now I work in animation.
Awesome. Thank you. And Jet, how did you get started?
Oh, well, I started out I graduated from dentistry, and then I was offered a scholarship to Japan to take my PhD under oral pathology and molecular biology. I passed the requirements and they put me there. Initially, I wanted to do histology, which was checking oral diseases through the microscope. But then they figured out I would fit more into molecular biology, and that's how I got into cancer research. So, and the next thing I knew, I was there, and then I started teaching in the universities back home. And I still am into active. Well, prior to COVID, I was into active practice. And then up to now, I still do a lot of dental work and research on the side.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
My next question is, how does your secret identity kind of trickle into, how do they like work together? Does one influence the other? I'd love to hear how they both make you.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, for me, because I do a lot of cake decorating and I'm a dentist, so it's a lot of dexterity. So for me, cake decorating, and I love, like the other one, I like doing stuff that are artsy. So I think that's where my energy goes. And when you do a lot of dental patients in a day, it kind of gets boring and you want to interact with other people. So that's how I figured out I'd put up a coffee shop and do cakes. And because my mom used to bake a lot when we were kids, we'd have a different kind of cake every day. So I think that's how it influenced me. And I think most of it is just because of dexterity. So that's how it fits in. Plus, baking is a lot of chemistry. So it fits into what I.
Oh,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to mute you. I was trying to admit somebody like came up at the same time.
So I'll go for crafting and engineering, because usually, like when I was in school, everyone said like, oh, you're either an engineer or you're an artist, like you can't be both. But I think it definitely, like, my crafting is a good kind of break from, doing a lot of like technical thinking, but at the same time, I work in animation and it's a super creative field to be in. And we're making cartoons for kids. So there's this like, a lot of my headbands and stuff, like I think are kind of funny and exaggerated. And I think it just keeps a good balance between the two to like realize, you're doing engineering, but like you can still have fun with it. You can have a sense of humor with it. Like we're making cartoons at the end of the day. And if you can't have fun with that, so I think it definitely helps keep me kind of lighthearted and not take it super seriously. And it's a good, I like getting a chuckle from people. So I think it's a good exercise, both whatever is on my head or what we're making in animation.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I think for me, well, if you do field work, you kind of have to be active and sometimes like set up gear. Sometimes you have to like climb a tree, literally. I also scuba dive, and that really helps, actually. I think just always being in the water, being comfortable with the unknown, and being able to react to changes in your environment those are all things that you have to have if you want to do field work as part of your career or, your course of study. So yeah, I think that's how my secret identity kind of ties into what I do.
Awesome. Thank you. So I do have a question here. Does anybody have any insight on how to be a geneticist? I don't know if I even said that right.
Yes, I think I can do that because I'm into molecular biology.
Awesome.
So yeah, I think the easiest pathway to that is to take up molecular biology, and then from there you can break out into a specific specialization or field, because molecular biology is such a huge field of science. Or if not, you can get into biochemistry, and that way you can easily get into genetics. I think the nice thing about these two subjects is that you can cross, especially because these are all chemical interactions or atomic interactions. So it's easy to cross from like genetics to immunology, and that's what I've been doing, cancer, gene interactions, and so on. So yeah, I think that would be a good pathway to enter.
Awesome. Thank you. Question specifically for Shazzy. How long did it take you to get your education, and what kind of salary can you expect for animation?
Sure. So I did my undergrad in computer science, which was 4 years. And then I didn't feel like I had enough experience in graphics, games, animation. So I did my master's, which was 2 years. And it was more of like a hands-on where you're building a project for the 2 years. We built a whole video game and stuff like that. So a total of 6 years. When I was doing my master's, I did intern at DreamWorks Animation and Nickelodeon, and then I ended up working at Nickelodeon for 4 years. After graduation, I won't give exact amounts, but you can if you look up like software engineering, like salaries, that's really what you start with. It definitely was a good amount where I could pay all my bills. I wasn't stressed about anything, and it was definitely, there's an extra cushion there. And then obviously the longer you work, you get raises and you kind of move up higher roles. So again, for computer engineering, especially in animation and entertainment, it is very well paid, and I'm blessed that I haven't had to be stressed about money in any way. So if you look up kind of general ranges for software engineers and managers and going up, those are kind of pretty accurate for what you will see.
Awesome. Thank you. And we just have about a minute and a little bit left. So last question is for Vienna. Can you tell us, a basic day of field work? What does that look like? Well, some of us are moving around. Got 1 more minute.
Out in the field, daylight is really, you actually have to take that into consideration. So you normally start your day early and you end it early. So yeah, when I was doing work out at UBC Malcolm Knapp Research Forest, I would leave around like 5 a.m. We'll get there, we'll grab breakfast, and we'll start the day at around like 6 or 7. But we'll wrap up midway through the afternoon. So we'll actually get on little boats. We'll row across this massive lake, and then we pull my samples out. So we pull bones out of the lake. And then we'll rush back to the lab so we can process them and then analyze them in the subsequent days.
Let's get right started in with, how does your secret identity influence how you do your science?
Can I start? Sure. I like to show the pictures of if you have it. Like I sent some pictures of cakes that I do in my coffee shop. I don't know if it's there.
I would not have them. Madeline would probably
Okay.
have them. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I decorate cakes, and so the cakes that I decorate, it involves a lot of dexterity because I do like icing flowers and so on. And as a dentist, that's part of what I do as well. Well, you know what dentists do, the drill and stuff, and we work on very minute objects, which are the teeth and structures in the oral cavity. So that's how it probably connects. Plus, being a molecular biologist, it's a lot of chemistry and protein interactions or atomic interactions, and you kind of figure that out when you're big. So that's where it also probably meets up, these two careers.
Awesome.
So my secret identity was crafting and like making different kind of tiny hats. And I work in animation during my normal job. And I think it definitely like being like crafting, problem solving too, because it's like you're figuring out what you want to make, how you want to make it. There's so many ways you can do something. And for me, like my crafting stuff is usually funny and fun to wear. And working in animation and making cartoons for kids, I think that helps me stay kind of lighthearted and have a sense of humor, especially when times get stressful. I'll show up to meetings wearing my tiny hats, and it kind of like relieves a little bit of stress from everyone. So I think that definitely helps on that side of things. And then obviously a lot of engineering is kind of problem solving and thinking about things in different ways. So I think having a creative outlet helps me kind of think outside the box on my day-to-day stuff.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, and for mine, I shared a little bit about my contortionist background. I've been working on that for a little while. I really like aerial arts and things like that. And I think it helps if you want to do any sort of field work, because sometimes you have to get into pretty uncomfortable situations with having to set up gear. Sometimes you need to climb a tree. Sometimes you need to, be in an awkward position. So for instance, here's like an example of me doing a dig. This is a real human skeleton that's almost 3,000 years old. And so one of the things we were doing was we were looking at their health based on their bones. So you may be crouched over for a long period of time with a tiny little brush, trying to not, destroy whatever you're trying to collect, whatever evidence you're looking at. Yeah, and I think just being active, trying to live an active lifestyle helps with that.
Awesome. Thank you. And we have a question from Maria in the chat here, kind of similar, but taking the angle, how does your personal life, so your family and other things, influence your work life?
So for me, I'll actually quickly screen share too, if I can do this. Another thing I do on the side is I actually have my own little like cartoon series that I make, and I voice my own little cartoon character called Mitzi. So this is like the same thing that I do at work, like same technology and everything. And I can actually like when she moves, it's my face talking. So my husband is very patient with my cartoon voices and like all the things I kind of pitch ideas about, or I'm like, do you think this would be funny? And he like hears me constantly being silly. So someone definitely who's supportive of what you do and can also help you like manage your stress, or like know, when you're getting frustrated to take a break if you can't see that yourself. So I think definitely have, whatever your support system, if it's friends or if it's family, just leaning on them when you need to. And I also have a dog, a wiener dog, which is my family and very helps me manage my stress.
For me, it's probably kids. I'll do a screen share so people can see more or less what I do. Because my kids, they're the youngest, most especially, she is into, of course, cartoons and stuff. So I think she loves what Shazzy does. But yeah, these are my kids. And they usually tell me how to design stuff, how to design my cakes. So yeah, here are some of them. Gee, this is kind of difficult to do like screen share, but yeah, this was one of the things that I did. And it was because my daughter was telling me to do something about Frozen. So yeah, they serve as an inspiration. Plus on the dental side, because we have a lot of, because I come from the Philippines, so we do a lot of dental missionary work, medical missions and stuff like that, outreaches. So that's another inspiration for me to reach out to a lot of people as much as I can, because there's a lot of people who need a lot of help in the provinces, most especially. So this is me doing a mission and working on some kids who, for the first time, have seen a dentist in their whole life, and families as well. So yeah, those are my inspirations for the work that I do.
And quickly, what's your best cake decorating tip? Somebody would like to know.
Yeah, you know what? You have to be very creative and very imaginative, I guess. So and play around with colors and have that sense of humor, because that's the time that yeah, this is another one that I did. Just so I don't know how to explain it. It's just that I think I have a cartoon inside my head. So yeah, this is another one I did. And yeah, as long as you find inspiration, I guess you can be as creative as you want to be.
Awesome. A question for all three of you. How do you balance your professional life and your secret identity?
Sure.
It just kind of coexist. I don't think there's really like a trade-off. I think a really important thing to do is to do a self-audit, figure out what things you enjoy, what you naturally gravitate towards, and then see if you can convince people to pay you to do those things. So I think that's a secret for finding a good career.
I love that.
I think too, like, you know, there's definitely times where you can get caught up with work and your professional life and deadlines and stuff. And I think just like picking a day, whether it's a weekend or something, and just say, you know what, I'm taking a break. I'm going to do what I love. And I've definitely had those moments where I won't go to the craft store for months. And then I walk in, I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot like how happy I am being here. And like, you know, oh, I want to do this. I want to do this. So I think just like forcing that time too, and just being like, hey, I haven't done this in a while. Like, even if it's an hour, 2 hours, whatever your kind of secret identity is or your hobby, just like making time for that, because that's like really who you are and like what people kind of end up loving about you. So just knowing and making time for it, I think, is super important. And we're all guilty of letting it kind of slip sometimes. So just being okay with that, and, you know, taking a trip to the craft store or outside or whatever you need to do.
For me, I think it was kind of easy because, like, well, I go by appointment. So as a dentist, I take in patients when I have to, and I try to balance my schedule out. And then for the coffee shop, yeah, I try to give time to that as well. So I think it's just fixing your schedule and making sure that you have time for 2 parts of your life, or 3. And in that way, you organize stuff and you plan ahead. And then that's where you set the balance. And like what the other said, just to make sure that you set time for yourself as well, because you can really suffer from a burnout if you don't. And I think that's the most challenging part. If you do get into a burnout, you need to find something that's going to inspire you again. So yeah, that would be something to think about.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Are there any other questions? I don't think I've seen any new ones. Oh, Shazzy, what are some cartoons that you have animated?
Sure. So at Wild Brain, I worked on Fireman Sam, and I'm currently working on a Lego one, but I cannot say what, which I'm like really excited about. And then when I was at Nickelodeon, I was kind of on like an R&D immersive technology team. So we did a lot of virtual reality, augmented reality. So I actually ended up working on an app called Do Not Touch, which is like an AR app. And I actually got a mocap, like a SpongeBob character, which was really fun. Motion capture is like when you put a suit on and you can like drive a character live. So we did a lot of SpongeBob stuff. And then we did a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles experience for Comic-Con a couple years ago, which was super cool. So not traditional TV cartoons, more kind of like the immersive experiences and stuff like that.
Awesome. We have maybe 1 more minute tops. So I'm going to ask all of you to give one very quick piece of 1-sentence advice to somebody thinking about doing science. And you have 60 seconds before everybody leaves.
Okay, so we each have like 20 seconds.
Okay, I'll go. The moment you enter university, go and try to volunteer in a lab. It doesn't matter if you don't know anything. It doesn't matter that you haven't worked in a lab before. You'll learn those skills afterwards. Show your keenness, show up, always on time, and just get some volunteer experience just so you can get in the door, and then go from there.
Yeah, that's great advice. You can do it. Have some grace on yourself. It's okay if you need to cry. You'll get through it. And the path is not straight. I worked at defense companies and tax companies for like 3 years before I even got into animation. So your path is going to be like this, but if you're taking little steps forward, you're on the right path.
Right, you have 7 seconds.
Yeah, be imaginative, because a lot of things in science involves a lot of imagination.
All right. I feel like most of us have made it into this room. So welcome everyone. We have Jet, Shazzy, and Vienna with us. What is a good question we can start with this time around? Let's go for, if nobody has any starting questions, what does your typical work day look like? And maybe your typical evening look like after work?
That's really tough because every day is a little different. When you work in a university setting, like you may have one day where you're teaching, another day where you're in the lab, another day when you're in the field. And for me, I also work as an analyst for an agency. So those take up 2 of my days out of the work week as well. In terms of what I do in the evening, I actually really love gaming. It's kind of my little escape. I really like playing online games, and I also really like swimming. So I just love being in water. Yeah.
Awesome.
So for me, my normal work day is I'm obviously on the computer all day, but a lot of what I do is the way we make cartoons, we're using a new piece of technology. So there's a lot of supervisors and a lot of people that don't know this technology, and I do a lot of training. I always tell everyone I have a lot of patience because it's a new way to do things, and a lot of people, it's hard for them. They fall back on what they know and they'll resist it sometimes. So just making sure they're understanding like, hey, we have a whole team here to support you. We can build tools. These are the best ways to do things. These are the benefits. So I'd say half my day is that, troubleshooting problems that come up, what's going on. And then the other part is actually building tools and thinking of kind of best workflows and how we can keep kind of pushing the future of animation and stuff like that. And for after work, also before work, I do like to work out before to just kind of relieve any stress and just move my body a little bit, because I do sit all day, and not being in an office, I'm not walking as much. So I definitely make sure to do that. And then when I get off work, I definitely like to at least take an hour like away from a screen, because I stare at it so long. So whether it's like having dinner or going for a walk or playing a board game, just to like get away from it for a bit, because my other side hobbies are also like on the screen. So just making sure I have some time between.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of, I have a very messy schedule. In the mornings, I see my patients, and then of course I teach in the university, so I have to put that in as well, and then manage my coffee shop if I can. And then I also ghostwrite for blogs because I like writing as well.
So these are the things that I try to fit in whenever I can. And of course, when I have to relax, I go to the gym. I used to teach spinning on the side. That's another of my secret identities. So it's pretty weird. And then of course, I spend time with my kids because I think that's the most important thing that I have to do as a mom. So that's about it. But yeah, it's a pretty messed up schedule. So it's a lot of balancing.
Awesome. Yay, we all love dogs in the chat is what I'm seeing. Any tips on building and designing a silicone ear because the sizing seems to be difficult?
Ears come in so many different shapes and sizes, honestly. Like, I think whatever ear you're creating, someone probably in the world has it. It's actually a very, you know, there's just a lot of diversity in ear shapes and sizes. So do your best.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I don't have any advice because I've never worked with silicone, but it seems like you're making a big one and then a small one, and a lot of like for crafting. And what I do is like, you keep trying and trying different versions, and maybe you change something and you keep kind of making steps to where you're going. And like, same thing when I looked at my drawings from like 5 years ago to now, it's like you'll keep getting better the more you just are hands-on and practicing and practicing. So I would say, you know, keep just going at it, try changing one thing, see what happens, and see if you can kind of figure it out.
I have another one. Can you tell me something that surprised you the most about your industry after you started working in it?
I didn't realize this when I first started university, but when you know, because courses are so structured, you know, you have these core requirements and then you get a couple electives to choose from. But if you go past that, so after, you know, first degree, if you're interested in going for a master's or a PhD, there's a lot of flexibility. It's really whatever you can convince your boss that you want to do. If you can convince them and get their backing, then that can be, you know, the schedule you have and the kind of work or research you do. So I really love staying in school because I feel like you kind of get to design your schedule and you get to decide what you want to work on. You get to choose what problems interest you the most. And I think that's a lot of freedom.
That's really cool.
I would say for going into, I guess, a little bit of engineering and animation, like in school, you are taking all these different classes to like figure out what you like, what you don't like, and that's all you do every single day. And then, you know, so I thought, okay, I'm going to be an engineer. I'm sitting like 8 hours writing like thousands of lines of code every day, which is not at all what it is. It's like you get a problem, you think about it, maybe you write a couple lines of code, it doesn't work, you think about it again. So that was like super surprising for me. And then I think for animation too, like I had no idea really how cartoons were made, the amount of people in every single department that come together to make it. It's always kind of magic because studios don't ever show the behind the scenes of how things are really made. So I think just going there and realizing like at the end of the day, it's just a bunch of people being creative that come together to make this work, which is, I think, is really cool. Like it makes it really special. And you see like going back and now watching stuff that you worked on, you're like, oh, I remember that, like working on that was terrible, or like, oh, that was really fun. And I think like that's kind of like the magic behind it.
Cool.
Yeah, for me, well, in the field of research, it's amazing that there's so much unexplored territory to touch on, especially if you're medical science. There's a lot of things that we don't understand and are continuing to understand. In the field of dentistry, I think how patients can actually touch you, especially those who really can't afford your services, and you reach out to them, how they can affect you in a way, at an emotional level. It's awesome, and I didn't know it could be that fulfilling and inspiring. So yeah, definitely.
Awesome. I think I have maybe asked you this. I've asked how your secret identity has maybe influenced your science. What about how has your science influenced your secret identity and your hobbies?
I just, yeah, I think I've already mentioned it in a couple of the other recordings already, but I think when you start with what brings you joy and then look for careers that fit that other side of your life, I think that's a much easier way to go about it. Like I took a long time to, you know, like trying to force myself to believe like, oh, this particular career is the one for me, instead of really listening to myself and what I'm naturally gravitating towards. So I think being okay with changing your mind, being okay with growing and recognizing like, hey, this used to be interesting to me, but I'm actually, you know, I'd like to pursue something else is okay. It is scary to jump ship, but I think it's much more interesting to live a life full of many careers than one. It's fine. Some people like it. It's just not for me.
Awesome. Yeah.
I think my like technical background and, you know, working in animation is like you always have to provide some sort of solution. You can't just be, well, it doesn't work, can't do it. You know, like there's always, it might not be the best, but it's always thinking like, okay, here's 3 options, here's the pros, here's the cons, working through all of that. So I think when I do my crafting, like, yeah, there's times where I get frustrated. It doesn't turn out like how I was expecting, or, you know, something goes wrong. And just knowing like, you know, okay, if this was at work, I wouldn't quit. I would say I can do this, or I can do this, or let me try this, or let me do it again, or let me step away for 20 minutes and try again. And I think just applying that to things I have fun with is also helpful, so that helps me kind of manage that and, you know, at least finish something that I'm proud of.
Awesome.
Yeah, for me, it's baking is chemistry. So it's basically chemistry in action. So that's how it influenced my decision to have a second career. Yeah, and we're almost ending, so I'll end it at that.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much.
Start with a question to ask you guys about your secret identities, and how that maybe gives you different perspectives to your job. Like how has it affected your career, or your life in general?
Theresa, you want to go first or shall I?
Go for it. Go for it.
Yeah, no, I get that question a lot actually, because such a large part of my life is very music focused, but my career has always been very science focused. In fact, you know, when I graduated high school, all my high school teachers were shocked that I was going to UBC to study biology instead of going to a music program. And I think that the two sides of that part of my personality, they've always kind of fed each other. So like my logical brain, and that's sort of that intellectual side drives my creativity, and they balance each other out, because I'm kind of I'm a bit of a unique person, and so I feel that having those two, left brain, right brain things in my life, balances me, and they feed each other. And without one, the other suffers, oddly enough. When I'm bored at my job, my creativity suffers. When I'm not being creative, my job suffers.
Thank you so much for sharing. That's fantastic. And Tamisa, same question to you. How does that secret identity, biking really, really, really long distances up many hills, affect your career and perspectives?
For sure, for sure. So I want to say that really it's around learning about people and understanding and connecting with people. So when I volunteer or when I was cycling, I was meeting so many different people, and you learn so many different perspectives. You see so many different systems. I love systems. I love to, problem solve. So I think that it kind of transfers both from the work that you do outside of your actual work. And like Ingrid said, it really does amp up how your concentration or your focus is on either side. And so you actually get to do something different. Your brain thinks about something different for a little while, and then you come back and you'd be surprised to see how it all comes together.
Yeah, that you end up sort of refreshed from that.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So many teams that I work with, they have multiple sides to their personality or the things they're interested in. They're interested in arts and they're interested in science, and they're trying to make those decisions going into university as to what program should I apply for. And it sounds like, Ingrid, you were at that juxtaposition or that position where you needed to make those choices. I'm wondering if you could share a bit about how you went through that thought process.
Yeah, it's interesting because I actually have kind of changed careers a few times in my life. I'm 44 years old now, and I think for me, music was always a passion, but I'm also an extremely logical person, and I know what a struggle it is to be a professional musician, and I kind of felt like I liked these two things equally and had equal passion for them. And so the reason why I went the way that I did was because I felt I could secure a future for myself and do something that I was passionate about, because that's very important. It's more important to me than, job security, but it was something that would set me up for the future and something that I'm passionate about. And it would give me the freedom to pursue my other passion, which is music. And I've really been able to structure, because of that choice, been able to structure my life to center it around both of my passions. But I started out as a lab tech after university at UBC back in 2000, and then ended up working as a researcher in cancer for a few years, and then decided that I wanted to be around people and not at a lab bench pipetting and doing DNA assays. And so that's when I heard about respiratory therapy, and the rest is history, as they say.
Tamiza, as well, wondering, if you've had those moments of trying to decide what path to go, and similarly, how did you make those decisions, or how did you decide to make sure to carve out time to volunteer and bike?
Yes, for sure. So, I started off like Ingrid in chemistry. Actually, I did my bachelor's degree in chemistry, and I have to say, it was always about, where will I make impact? How can I contribute to my community in a way that is impactful and meaningful? And always very passionate about clean drinking water and wanting to be involved in that space. And so chemistry came around, and just like Ingrid, I was a lab tech as well for a couple of years, and then got drawn into the engineering side of things and wanted to be involved in actually creating the systems that are going to deliver this water. I have to tell you what really got me was the ability. I grew up in Africa, and so when I came to Canada, just this we take for granted. You open the tap and there's clean drinking water that comes out, and you flush the toilet, and your waste is out of your home, but you don't see what's happening behind the scenes. And so that's what drew me to wastewater treatment engineering. And my volunteer work is the same passion. How do I make impact in my community? Where can I make impact? And I'm able to take my systems thinking, the way you think about systems and processes, and apply it to the areas that I'm volunteering in.
Teresa, that's really interesting to me, because I actually have done some volunteerism myself. I went to Haiti and then Liberia, but more recently Sierra Leone, and worked in an Ebola treatment center. But I wasn't there as a clinician. I was actually working there as a WASH supervisor, which I'm sure you know what WASH is. So WASH stands for what is it again? Water and sanitation and hygiene. I knew nothing about this. But essentially I was managing a group of people who were in charge of the decontamination and PPE protection of all the clinicians who went into the hot zone of the Ebola treatment centers. So yeah, interesting that we have that connection there.
Was that something that you just you felt you wanted to be part of? Like it doesn't perfectly correlate with your career, but you just Yeah, where was the inspiration for that?
So there's like a social justice slash advocacy organization called AVAS, and I'm on their mailer list. And when the Ebola outbreak happened, they put a call out to looking for healthcare workers who are willing to go there and put themselves at risk. And I put up my hand thinking that they would want me as a respiratory therapist, but in fact, they didn't need respiratory therapists. They needed some people to manage these teams. And they called me up and said, well, I know this isn't really your wheelhouse, but are you willing to give it a shot? And I said, sure, why not?
Well, and speaks to sort of the diverse skills that you get in sort of a STEM career, and how you can, there's so many more options available to you that you can follow those interests in many different ways.
Just to add to that, just, be open to new experiences, say yes, and think about it later.
Yes.
And you'd never know what you're going to walk into and what you're going to learn.
And both of your stories, but I thought we might start again with just sort of sharing, if Ingrid and Tamisa want to share what their secret identity is again, and just how it enhances their careers and their lives, would be fantastic.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So yeah, my secret identity is that I'm a house music DJ and a vocalist and songwriter. And I've been doing that, some form of music, for my entire life, but been touring and performing live for the past 15 years. I performed on the Pride main stage on Sunset Beach, obviously not the last couple of years, but before that for 5 years in a row. Yeah, music is my other life.
Great. And so I'll add to that. My other life is as a volunteer. I volunteer extensively for many causes, specifically around social service, poverty alleviation. Most recently, I was part of the Right to Conquer Cancer, and with that came along the challenge to ride 200 kilometers from Vancouver to Hope. So how does it all kind of come together? It's really about trying to make impact in the community that I live in and belong to. My profession, I work in water and wastewater treatment, and so you can see that the two kind of come together just in terms of service to the community that I live in.
Awesome. We have a question. So Ingrid, how do you get the time in for good musical practice each day, and how do you choose pieces for yourself?
It's a great question. Yeah. Thank you. So right now I'm getting my master's on top of working full time, so definitely not able to fit in music every day. But before that, and this will continue after I'm done school, I just try to set it aside a little bit of time for myself. This is the way that I decompress. So, some people cook or draw or watch TV or whatever, and this is just sort of the way that I decompress. So it's not really like finding the time, it sort of just happens, I guess. In addition, the friends that I consider my sort of extended family, they're all very enthusiastic music consumers or musicians themselves. And so some of the ways that we socialize with each other is through music. So I write music with my friends or we play together. And how I choose, I'll go see my favorite performers and listen to what they're playing. I go and listen to sets online and listen to what they're playing. Usually when I'm writing, it's a lot of inner reflection, and the lyrics that I write are often about whatever is emotionally going on with me or something that has gone on with me in the past. I don't know if that answers your question, hopefully.
It was the same sort of question to Tamisa. I know many high school students are already feeling very pressed for time. And so thinking of, we go around going, oh, I guess even busier through university and careers. How do you find time to make sure that you're fitting in that stuff that adds more to your life?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And some of the work that I do is in when I volunteer my time, it's really about giving to something other than what I'm doing right now. And you hear always that when you give, you get back you get tenfold back in terms of just the experience, the people you meet, etc. And I find that by having that balance, it gives me, you said in the last session, Jenny, it's a bit of a refresher. You're thinking about something completely different from what you're focused on, and you're able to then refocus when you come back to what you're looking at.
Certainly.
I agree. It's so interesting, like being in public service, because that's what you and I are. To me, is that we are public servants. That is the vocation that we've chosen. And then volunteerism, which I've also done in the form of I'm going on medical missions, but also spreading joy through music. Like you really feel it's not just you expressing yourself, but when I look at people who are dancing and smiling and enjoying what I'm providing for them, that feeds me and feeds my soul. So
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. I might just ask again about sort of making those choices about careers, because I know it's something that's on the mind of a lot of teens, is how do you make that choice? And they might have parents or family members that are suggesting they do one thing versus what they might want to do. And then if you want to answer that quickly, and then we've got a question about projects that some of you guys are working on.
Yeah, for sure. So maybe if I can start. So, I think back and, when I'm asked this question, I reflect and I think about what I want to spend time doing. And that's what I would suggest that you think about. You want to be able to find meaning in the work that you do. People say that to be good at something, you ought to spend about 10,000 hours doing that something. So if you're going to spend 10,000 hours learning how to do something and do something, it ought to be something that you enjoy and you love and you're finding meaning from. And so that's really what drove me in terms of the spaces that I wanted to look in. I wanted to make an impact in the community I lived in. I have a degree in chemistry, moved away from lab work into engineering, really trying to build systems that deliver clean drinking water, that have the ability to treat our wastewater so that when we're discharging into the environment, it's clean and it's safe.
Rather than answer that question, I kind of want to answer Anne's question.
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, related. So thinking
we're running out of time here, but I think this is a really, really good question.
Absolutely.
And thank you for asking it, because I had the same crisis of conscience when I was in high school and looking to decide what direction I was going to go in. I think the statistics say that these days people change careers an average of 3 times in their life. And if you are 100% nuts about something and you know that it is the passion of your life, then specialize early for sure. But I think there is value in considering to start a little bit wider and keep your options open and see what happens. We talked earlier in the last breakout group. I've changed my career. It's always been in science, but it has been 3 distinct careers in my time in the last, since I graduated high school in '96. I've had 3 very different careers. And largely because I had a biology degree as my undergrad, and then I just kind of upped my education as I went along and sort of learned and grew as a person and learned more about myself and what I wanted out of life. Hopefully that helps.
Absolutely. Yeah. And those sort of remembering that even if you're specializing, there's a lot of skills that you're learning, that those soft skills that can be applied to many different careers. So there's always that chance to sort of move and change careers too. And Tamiza, you had something to add to that as well.
Yeah, I was going to take that and also respond to that last question about the projects that I'm working on. I was going to say sometimes, not all the time, in terms of my entire working life, I've always tried to do something new and different within the organization or within the field. And so we work on many projects. I worked on the Seymour Capilano filtration project. This was the first of its kind in Canada, a drinking water treatment plant that was filtering. And so you don't hear about dirty water anymore in Vancouver. And so many projects kind of guide you. That one, others of its kind, guided me into what I'm doing now, which is quality management, ensuring that the work that we do is of a high quality and delivers services in a very distinct way. So think about your experience, your journey. Your journey will always guide you towards where you'd like to be.
It doesn't, when you're looking at that journey, planning it out, you're like, it's never ends up that way. But when you look back, you're like, oh, well, that volunteer opportunity or meeting that person led to this, and you can see that path, but it's so hard to see from the outside.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So I'm sure a lot of you are trying to fit all these different aspects of yourselves into your daily life and wondering what you're going to look at sort of after high school. And we have Ingrid and Tamisa to share their experiences with us as well. First of all, do you guys have any questions? Because we can start with those. I do love starting by just asking sort of how that secret identity has helped form and inform who these people are, Tamisa and Ingrid, and how that works with their careers. And we could start with that question.
Sure, I can start this time. Yeah, so I think I've said this before, but there's sort of two sides to my personality, and I feel that sort of my right and left brain, they balance each other out. And so having these two very, very different passions sort of feed each other, feed my energy and my creativity. And when I say creativity, I don't just mean in music, but also my creative and critical thinking in healthcare. And it's really just, it's been wonderful to have these two very different passions in my life.
Fantastic, thank you. Tamisa.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so I volunteer extensively. I support causes that are related to social service, poverty alleviation. Most recently, I was part of the Ride to Conquer Cancer, and part of that was riding 200 kilometers, cycling from Vancouver to Hope. And so I'm gonna say both of these. It gives me a sense of something different to do that's different from the work that I do on a day-to-day basis, enables me to give back to the community that I live in and to be part of how it's formed. What does it give me? It gives me just a different outlook, a different sense of focus when I'm working or outside of work.
Fantastic. We've got two questions in the chat. So the first one is about balancing your secret identity and work in school. And I think that's probably like just finding time, right? Figuring out how you do it all.
I know that my friends often and my boyfriend refer to me as like the busiest person they know. I'm sure Tamisa, you can relate to that. But I mean, I like to be busy, but that's definitely a challenge for sure, especially now. I'm in the process of obtaining my master's degree in health leadership at the same time as working full time. And so for sure, trying to find little places to continue to do my art is difficult at times. I think the way that I've sort of managed it is perhaps a little bit different, but the people that I consider sort of my extended family are all also musicians or music enthusiasts. So my social time is also immersed in that passion. So I write music with my friends and we play music together, we DJ together, and you know, we talk about it and we sit and listen to it together. So that really sort of allows me to like two birds, one stone it, kind of, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's also my leisure time, you know, because everyone needs time to relax, and some people do yoga, some people go for a walk. I like to kind of dive into my music when I'm having my time off and trying to unwind for work.
Yeah.
How about you, Tamisa?
Oh, yeah. So I would say that, you know, what I get from giving is much more than what I give. And so my experience has always been that the service that we provide just makes such an impact that when you see what part you play, even if it's the smallest, a really small way of touching somebody else's life, I feel like I want to do more. And then I try to balance it and I try to ensure that it all kind of comes together. And really boils down to you feeling meaning for it, knowing the why you're doing it, and it will guide you in how you balance. Sometimes one will be heavier than the other, and sometimes you'll be able to say, oh, I can do both and I'm having fun at this. Or sometimes you'll take a step back and say, okay, enough, I just need to chill for a bit. And so it is a bit of a balancing act, but all kind of boils down to you wanting and feeling that impact.
That's fantastic. And it sounds like really giving yourself that grace, like if you don't have that time and space to do that thing, all of it in that moment, that you will find that time. And it sounds like both of your hobbies give you back so much and so much energy. That must be such a drive to keep doing them too. I've got some questions about how you decide what you want to do. We've got a lot of young people who are at these points in their lives where they're going to soon need to be making these decisions. So how did you figure out what you wanted to do for work?
Yeah, I love that this has been a theme in all three groups. This question has been asked every time, and it is the universal question, isn't it? I will say the same thing I said to the other two groups. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. When I graduated high school, I knew that I had a passion for science and a passion for music. All my teachers thought I was going to go to music school. I ended up choosing to get a biology degree and continue my music as a sort of side gig. and I got a general biology degree, and I didn't become a respiratory therapist until I was almost 30 years old. And that has just been the joy of my life, this career. Especially now. Sorry. Sometimes I get a little bit clamped because of the last year and a half. But I mean, I didn't figure that out until I was 30. So the statistics say that people change careers on average 3 times in their lives. You are under no obligation to decide what you want to do right now for the rest of your life. That is not your job at this time. So pick something that you're passionate about. If there's something that you know 100% you are like, this is what I'm doing for the rest of my life, then heck yeah. If you're not sure, I mean, my advice is to choose an educational pathway that will allow you to explore your options later in life when you've grown more and learn more about yourself and what you want to do.
Yeah. I think the best advice I got from my uncle, who was a academic researcher, was just, at the age of 40, or after you've been doing your career for 5 or 10 years, will it matter if you took an extra 2 years to get there here or there? And no, it absolutely doesn't. And those experiences that you gain and opportunities and how you can grow yourself as a human and maybe try things out and see if you like them before committing. And Tamiza, same question to you. How did you figure out what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I grew up in Africa. When I moved to Canada, some of the things that really just blew my mind was that the easy ability to open the tap and you got clean drinking water, no thoughts about where it came from, how it got there. You flush your toilet, the waste is taken out of your home and you don't even think about what happens after it. And I wanted to know, what was in it, what was there, how did it get there, and how were we able to we're in a place where sometimes we take it for granted. And so that's really what drove me. But what I would say is, what I've learned over the years is, spend the time or invest the time in what you're going to enjoy, what you're going to find meaning in your life. They say it takes 10,000 hours to be a professional or really good at something. Well, think about what you want to spend 10,000 hours doing and what is it going to give you back and how are you going to feel about it, and let that guide you to where you want to go.
We've just got a couple minutes left. Were there some key experiences that you tried that helped you figure it out? Was it volunteering? Was it that job in a lab? What were some of those experiences?
Yeah, for me, Yeah, it was a job in the lab. Me too. I was sitting there for hours a day, pipetting, and no one talked to me in that lab. And I started getting super lonely. And then I met a friend of a friend who was a respiratory therapist. And he started talking about his job and how, he was right in the middle of humanity and helping people. And I was sold right then and there.
Yeah, pretty similar. I wanted to have impact and the lab wasn't doing it for me. And so I wanted to be part of something that was going to make a change in people's lives. And that's what drove me to looking at something different.